So when you're sailing a butterfly, there's lots of things to remember. It depends on the wind conditions. It depends on what part of the sailing course you're on. And a lot of the answers are, well, it depends. Like, what should the boom vang be? Well, it depends on various things. So rather than try to memorize everything, I've put over the years all the different tricks that I use on a cheat sheet that you can print out and laminate, put in your boat. I just want to explain that this is what works for me. I've used it to win 2 national championships, but there's obviously more than one way to sail a boat. So this video we're going to look at it in more detail, and hopefully it'll help your sailing as well. So when you buy a butterfly, you're actually buying 3 boats for the price of 1. Under 5 miles an hour, it's very light conditions. Between 5 and 14 miles an hour, you have to be fast, and above 15 miles an hour, you have to be fit. And this is how we're going to break things down. In other words, you can have a very slow boat and do well when it's under 5 or above 15, but you need to be a really good sailor and also have a good boat to do well in the medium or be fast conditions. So the first condition we're going to look at is being smart. Being smart is interesting because you can be very light and be very competitive in a butterfly. It means if you're fast, you can be going fast in the wrong direction. This is where you look for clues. You look for the water to see if it's a different color. The color will tell you if there's wind there or not. You look for whether or not people in the area are sitting on the side of the boat or the middle of the boat, and that'll tell you how much pressure is on the sail. So this is where the light sailors tend to do really well, the lighter and the younger ones. Being fast is for the medium conditions, and most racing occurs in this range of wind. You can be light and still be competitive. You can be heavier and still be competitive. But you absolutely have to have good equipment, good boat, good sail. In racing, most of the time the boats tend to stay together in groups, and obviously if you have an advantage with boat speed here, you're going to do very well. There's all kinds of tricks we'll describe at the bottom that will help with boat speed, but boat speed is the most important thing in these medium conditions. And then there's being fit. There's really no substitute for being in shape to sail a butterfly in conditions that are over 15. That's an average wind speed. If you're light, it'd be closer to like 12 or 13 miles an hour. If you're quite heavy, it'd be maybe 17. But there's a point with which the boat speed goes out the window and it becomes a pure question of how fit are you, how good are you at hiking, keeping the boat flat, making sure you don't get too much water in it. And that's how you win races when it's windy. We'll be looking at this in more detail, but the number one thing for this particular column is if you're not in shape, then you've got to get in shape to be competitive when it's windy. So within each of these 3 different conditions, I've broken the cheat sheet into 3 different groups. Before the start of the race, I've got the settings that you would have for going upwind, which is the first windward leg. Then when you're around the windward mark, you're going to come downwind, either on a reach or a run. So I've got the downwind setting, so those are the changes that you'd make at the first mark. Then at the bottom of the course, if you're going back upwind again, you'd set it for the upwind and so on. I've also got the section at the bottom, which is like a reminder of things I like to keep in mind when I'm racing. We're going to start by looking at a laser, which is obviously a very popular boat. It's Olympic class, and there's over 200,000 that have been made over the last 40 years. If we're looking down at a laser from up above, the black dot is the mast, the 2 lines are the boom, and then you've got the sail, and you've got the drag coming from the wind going around the sail on the leeward side. We're just going to look at the leeward side here. So the boat's basically going upwards to the right, and the round mast is in the absolute worst position because it's creating a lot of drag, and that's why you have to move the telltales of the laser back so that they flow properly. If they're too close to the mast, they don't flow. If you have the boom vang set on a butterfly in its tight position going upwind, it becomes an extension of the boom, which is not very good. It creates the same amount of drag as you see in a laser. In this next picture, you have the worst possible situation on the left, where the lever is actually pulled towards the skipper, and it's creating even more drag, which is in red. And then you've got the last picture on the right, which is where the lever is pushed away from the skipper, and it becomes an extension not of the boom, but of the sail. This is a very advanced fitting, and setting, and what it does, it creates a three-dimensional curve in the sail, which is very fast. So if we look at how this boat is set up, at the bottom of the mast, you cannot even see the boom vang lever because it's pushed away from the skipper and is behind the mast. This is a closer picture of the setting, and the way we call this is we have over-rotated the mast. This is a series of technologies that were perfected by some very good Australian friends in the early 70s, and it has led to some of the most high-performance dinghies in the world. This next picture is very interesting. You have the boat on the right that appears to have a larger mast, thicker mast, than the boat on the left. In fact, the masts are identical. The difference is the setting of the vang. The boat on the right has got a tight vang. The boat on the left has got a loose vang. The vang is over-rotated and turned so that the mast is facing towards the wind and would appear to have a smaller profile. This does several things. First of all, the mast becomes an extension of the sail, so there's less drag. Because it's an extension of the sail, it actually creates lift, and it also creates a three-dimensional curve. If you have a close look, the mast on the left is bending to windward compared to the mast on the right. Here's another picture from another angle, and this makes it very clear that you've got this three-dimensional curve. You've not only got the curve of the sail horizontally, but you've also got the curve of the sail vertically. In other words, the mast is bending to windward. It's like a dish. Instead of just a curved sail, it's more like a dish. It catches more wind, it's much more powerful, so it's not only creating less drag, it's creating more lift. And what this means is that unless you're overpowered, you want to have a loose vang. So what you want to remember is the setting for the boom vang is you want it to be loose, and you want it to be so you can push it 20 degrees past the boom until it gets windy, and then when it's windy you want to crank it on really hard, because then it's just a question of flattening the sail. But until you're overpowered, you absolutely want to have a loose vang. It is the most misunderstood part of the butterfly, and the single adjustment that will make the most difference in your racing. So our next adjustment is called the Cunningham, or downhaul. This is the fitting that pulls the boom down. I like to keep it loose, and only when I'm overpowered I pull it tight. And that also is true for the outhaul, loose, and then if I'm overpowered, I pull it tight. Basically, everything is loose until I'm overpowered. Then you want to just get it tight. The reason is because you want to flatten the sail out, and that creates less power because you're already overpowered. Our final control for going upwind is the main sheet. The main sheet is a major control you're always holding in your hand. The way a main sheet is set up in a butterfly is rather unusual. You actually hook it underneath the rail on the far side of the cockpit and pull down. Very few other classes do this. The nice thing about this is it pulls the boom down and out, which is what the boom vang normally does. This allows you to have a loose vang, which allows you to have an over-rotating rig. So it actually is part of the design that works very, very well. I like to set up the main sheet and the boom position so that the end of the boom is just at the side of the boat. If it's in closer, it creates a lot of sort of sideways lift, which just pulls you sideways, not very fast. And if it's out too far, you'll go fast, but you're not going to point very high. So an ideal setting is where the end of the boom is almost always over the edge of the boat. And for me, that's the best setting in all conditions. Now, obviously, if it's windy, you just crank it on because the wind is going to push it out. You've got to try to pull it in. It's going upwind, and we're about to round the windward mark, and we want to start to set up for the downwind leg. The reason why the order is different here is this is the order of adjustments that I make when I'm rounding the windward mark to set up for downwind, just as the order at the top is what I set when I'm finishing a downwind leg, getting ready to go upwind. The outhaul is the simplest adjustment. I don't touch it during the race. If it's windy and the Cunningham is tight, then I'll loosen it, otherwise I don't touch it. So the main sheet going downwind is pretty simple. You let it out as far as possible and the sail's not luffing. So this means on a reach you let it out till luffs, then you pull it in a bit. On a run you let it out as far as it'll go. If you're going downwind and it's tippy, the boat loses stability and you think you might tip, the easiest way to prevent this is to pull the boom in until it's more stable. This creates a reverse flow of the sail. It's called sailing by the lee. It's more stable than sailing normally. So the rule, if it's really tippy, is just pull the main chain in a bit. The way that you set the vang downwind is interesting. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of different opinions. I'll just let you know what works for me. If it's too tight, the back of the sail, called the leech, is like very stiff. If it's too loose, it'll just sag and not create any power. I like to set the vang so it's just tight enough so it moves back and forth a little bit on its own. I like refer to this as breathing. It kind of moves back and forth maybe 6 or 8 inches. What this does is actually a form of pumping, but it's nature pumping. You're not doing it. Pumping is illegal in most cases, but in this particular case it's legal. So I like to have it so the sail just breathing a little bit. The back of the sail is just moving back and forth on its own. It's very fast. So now we're going to look at some of the tricks that I use when I'm racing that have served me very well. When it's light air, which we get quite a lot in lake sailing, which is what the butterfly is tuned for, it pays handsomely to feel the wind, look around, just be aware of your surroundings. I like to wear as little clothes as possible. Don't be afraid to close your eyes and just imagine where the wind's coming from. Just get a feeling for what's going on. When I say sail the competition, what I mean is don't go off and do something on your own. Try to stay with the group. If you've got the right setup and the right boat, then there's no need to sort of roll the dice and try something on your own. I like to sail with the competition light air. Wrong shoulder is a little trick that I use. What it means is just before I tack, I like to look over my other shoulder, the shoulder you don't normally look at, which is the leeward shoulder, to see what the boats are doing. If they're not moving, don't tack. Now it gets serious. This is where boat speed means everything. Pipeline refers to, it's a technique, it's actually from the pipeline ski event in the Olympics, where on either side of the pipe you're going slowly, but right in the middle you're going fast. What this just my reminder to myself that I want to try all the different things I can do with my weight and my controls to find the edge of what works and then the sweet spot in the middle that's working the best. Again, I sail the competition. Now we start to look at angles. If I'm beside someone and I'm not pointing as high, then I should tack. If I'm pointing higher, I should not tack. Just straight geometry. It works very, very well. And now we're moving from the finesse into the brute strength portion of sailing. If it's windy and you're racing, you have to be in shape. You got to pace yourself because a race could last an hour or more. And in a butterfly, you got to keep the bow up because you don't want to take on water. If you get water in the cockpit during a race, it's very difficult to get rid of it. So we're going to end this video with a couple of other things that have served me well during the race. At the start, I like to listen to the boat that's behind me. It was called On My Hip. I can hear it with my left ear. What that boat is doing dictates how quickly or how soon I should start. My definition of a good start is if I have clean air after 10 seconds. So I don't mind starting at the boat in the second row and tacking if that's my plan. As far as boat speed is concerned, I have to know my controls, and I want to be able to sail without looking at the sail or my controls. As far as marks are concerned, it's really simple. Think ahead, don't get greedy, communicate with people. If you want room, ask for it early. Say, I'm about to ask for buoy room, please get ready. On reaches, really simple. If you're in a puff, bear off, it'll stretch the puff. If you're not in a puff, head up a little bit. On the runs, just test to see whether reaching or running is good. That's all different angles you can take going downwind. And of course, look behind, see where the puffs are, and stay in the pressure. And the finish line, always protect the right. Come in from the right. That's worth up to 2 boat lengths because you have the right of way in the finish line.